Welcome to Selling in the Motor Trade, in association with Automotive Management and Simco Training. This is the weekly podcast where we share best practice, tips, and ideas on how to sell more cars, improve your service department, and generally put more profit into your dealership or dealer group. I'm your host, Simon Bowkett, or some of you might already know me as Skippy. And firstly, I want to say thank you for taking the time to tune in. Hi, and welcome to another episode of Selling in the Motor Trade. It's my great pleasure today to introduce a very, very good friend of mine, Frank Genobile. Now, I first met Frank in San Francisco at a National Automotive Dealers Association. We bumped into each other at it was some sort of do where, from memory, we were starving. I think we both flew in from a long flight there. We went to some meal, and it was not so much a meal, it was just drinks night. We both looked at each other and said, we need to eat. I'm starving. Let's go and find a restaurant. And we just hit it off in some restaurant downtown San Francisco. And we've been meeting up at every National Automotive Dealers Association for the last, goodness me, Frank, it must be 10, 15 years, something like that. How many years is it, sir?
Well, that was 2007. And yes, apart from this year, we've been to every NADA since. So the association is now beyond 14 years, and it's been a very enjoyable one.
Listen, it's such a pleasure to have you on here. So a great friend as well. Now, Frank, we start off with this podcast trying to get to know our guests a little bit. So we have a quick fire round. So, and I probably know some of these answers already, but let's find out from you, sir. What would you prefer, a cold beer or a glass of wine?
Definitely a glass of wine.
Definitely a glass of wine. Are you more of a beach holiday or a city break person?
In Europe, definitely a beach holiday.
Definitely beach holiday. Fair enough. You live on the beach anyway, so you are in Europe a beach holiday. That sounds fair. Are you more of an Italian meal or maybe a Chinese?
No, more definitely Italian.
Definitely Italian meal. Okay. Good movie or maybe a great book?
Definitely a movie.
Definitely a movie. And are you an early bird or a night owl?
Yeah, early bird for sure.
For sure. Perfect. All right. Listen, thank you very, very much. So, Frank, the people who may not know you, I know in the Australian market, there might be too many people who don't know you, but this podcast is mainly our audience is Europe, America, not in Australia just as much as those other places there. So, listen, tell us, how did you start in the motor trade?
That's a good question. So I was one of those young kids who just loved reading all about the automotive industry. So I would buy every magazine I could from the age of 13, and front cover to back cover, I'd read it all. So I just had a ferocious appetite for anything automotive, and combining, if I can say it this way, my skills in accounting in an industry that I love was the perfect combination. So and then, of course, I discovered that the automotive industry is just incredibly challenging and complex, which provides so much ability to advise and consult.
Yeah, it is. I tell you what, it's you speak to other people in other industries, it's so complex. How many industries do you have to buy something and sell something as part of the same transaction? And then we have all the different departments. There are actually so many different businesses within the businesses added into the relationship with the manufacturers and the targets they said. I don't know many other industries would be as complicated to make profit. And then you've got a return on sales. What's good look like, Frank? Is it 3%, something like that? Or maybe higher than that at these times, but it's such a complicated industry, isn't it?
Yeah, well, long-term 2 to 3% has always been regarded as reasonable, but at the moment we're seeing dealers achieving even 8 to 10%, these are heady times. And well, that's what happens when you have a major constraint in supply.
Yeah, it is. Now, listen, this podcast, as I said, most of the time our listeners are in Europe and America a little bit more. But listen, they might be sitting there thinking, what's an Aussie know about the motor trade? Can you just tell us a little bit about your experience? Because I understand you worked in the UK motor trade for a while as well.
I did, Simon. So I joined a firm back in 1987, and there was I suppose, the start of a motor industry team, and I was immediately attracted to that within 6 months of joining the firm. And essentially, I threw myself into that, if you like, specialisation, and we quickly accumulated a number of clients. And I quickly discovered that the complexity associated with these businesses, and therefore, dare I say it, the ability to add value when you could identify best practice in one operation, and if you could assist in implementing best practice in another operation. So that was something that I discovered early on in the piece. In 1995, we were part of the Grant Thornton network. Sure, you know Grant Thornton well in the UK. They're a significant network. And I was sent over to the UK in the Milton Keynes office, well known for its roundabouts.
Yes.
To go around and assist a lot of the offices. I think there was in the vicinity about 45 offices back then of Grant Thornton, because Grant Thornton had a significant client portfolio in terms of car dealerships. So my job was to go around to offices where partners had a significant number of dealerships and assist in providing value-added services. So I would go around and do an analysis of their current profitability by department and identify, call it profit leaks or profit opportunities, and go out and present to the dealers. And I have to admit, a lot of the actual then Grant Thornton partners found that very confronting in that it wasn't done to be able to challenge clients in that way. But then again, I'm an Aussie, and that's what we're used to.
That's what we're used to. We don't mind a bit of a challenge sometimes. So listen, you're an accountant.
We don't.
Okay. But listen, aren't accountants meant to be boring? And by the way, if people are listening to this, you might not know, okay, Frank is one of the least boring people you could ever meet. If you ever see his shoes out at a National Automotive Dealers Association conference or something like that, he is not a boring person at all. So you're not just an accountant. Can you tell us a little bit about your company and what you do with the dealers? Because you're not just adding the numbers up. You're not a bean counter, really, are you?
Well, if someone asks me what I do, I say I help dealers. And the way I help dealers is to basically optimize their businesses. So we've got in excess of 100 dealers as clients here in our office in Melbourne, Australia. But I've also, one of my other, if you like, core functions is to run dealer profit comparison meetings. So that involves two major brands that I've been involved with for a long time now, Mazda and BMW. And essentially what we do is we get all of the dealers together in specified groups, like size and whatnot, and they come from all places over Australia into one meeting, and we basically compare numbers and discuss best practice. So that's a lot of fun. You learn a lot and you get to help a lot of people. And there's nothing more satisfying than having a dealer come up to you afterwards and say, gee, we implemented that in our business and now I'm making X dollars more. So that was a fabulous initiative. So, we're always in search of those gold nuggets that really add value and create better businesses.
I suppose that's why we really hit it off. We love going to a conference in the States and finding out what's that little nugget, that golden nugget that can make a difference there. So I suppose our jobs aren't too dissimilar in a way, but you're more of an accountant side of the business, and we'll be looking at processes and systems and sales. But hey, listen, over that time, you've seen some really good operators. You must have seen some great operators over the years. Does anything particular stand out that separates the greats, or the greats from the good?
Look, I suppose just a few common themes that resonate. There's no doubt that the great operators that I've seen are ones that have skin in the game. I think you may have heard this saying, but the crops always grow better with the sound of the farmer's footsteps nearby. So, that vested interest, that skin in the game creates a level of commitment and I suppose ownership of that business. It's hard to replicate in a publicly owned environment. And all of the best dealers, without question, that I've come across are all privately owned. So that's not to say there's not some great publicly owned dealers. There are, but the best of the best, the entrepreneurial flair that one can observe when it's privately owned, very hard to replicate in the publicly owned format.
Yeah, that's
so I suppose the private ownership and people who are genuinely good at engaging others, genuinely good at engaging their team, who have elevated levels of capability when it comes to people management. They're the key differentiators I
Yeah.
see.
Yeah, I suppose so many times I've met some of your clients over the years at conferences, and I'm thinking Jeff stands out, lots of other Mazda dealers as well. And you're dead right. These people, they still have that passion for the business. They're great communicators, and it's just their business. They're always talking about their business, aren't they? And they have that skin in the game. We're going to get on to later on talking about how the world's changing, where the PLCs are getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And I'll get your views on that. But the flip side of that question I just asked, what would you say are some of the mistakes that you see time and time again the struggling dealers making?
Well, I think struggling dealers tend to be very short-term focused. And I mean, talking about some of the other key attributes, so I've spoken about private ownership.
Hmm.
Um, that's obviously a big factor. I've spoken about the people management side of it, but then what you need is obviously well configured systems and processes. We all know that. Okay, I mean, you've created a living by basically
Yeah.
assisting dealers in implementing that, and to some degree I have as well. But then there's the other piece, which is the accountability. So the accountability you can't escape from. The knowledge that you have to face your manager or the other principal and actually explain your results on an ongoing basis means that you have the accountability and you can't escape. So accountability is absolutely important as well. So the ones that tend to, I suppose, not maintain those standards are the ones who are this subpar performers. Oh, well, we won't have that review meeting. Oh, it's okay. I'll let John does 25 cars a month, so we won't worry about his paperwork being up to scratch. And so what you're doing is effectively lowering the bar because you're allowing someone to deviate from what is required. So, it's the short-term thinking that we see that differentiates or creates bad performance.
Yeah, you're right. We work in sales departments lots and the after sales side of it. We see that so often. John sells 25 cars a month. Yeah, I know he cuts corners left, right, and center. With the compliance, he's probably not the best on compliance, but let's just sweep that stuff under the carpet. But again, you allow John to get away with it. You tell everyone else that this isn't serious. They can all do what they want. So yeah, I love the idea of the accountability. And again, all the top performers we're dealing with and working with, it's that same accountability all the time. Hey, listen, so the National Automotive Dealers Association, we always meet up there. So I had to ask you a question about this. From 2007, great memory, by the way. Is there anything that stands out, any standout moments at the conference that you thought, wow, that's a game changer?
So for me, a couple of, and I think we've both been to these sessions. I at the time, I really enjoyed the video, utilizing a video to, I suppose, improve your digital presence. That was a bit of a game changer at the time. And I think the gentleman's name was Sean Bradley. He was the presenter, and he was a hugely energetic and I suppose entertaining presenter. But his subject matter and the use of video and the fact that it's a lot more visible online and you get ranked higher in terms of Google searches, and that, to me, that was a game changer. And it's something that I brought back to my clients, and the adoption of that, those that were, I suppose, courageous enough and put the time and effort in to actually establish some processes there really got great benefit. The other one was Dale Pollock and Velocity. So that's going back a bit, but it was all about almost looking at each individual car from an ROI perspective.
Yeah.
And to me, it completely changed the way people thought about their used car stock. Suddenly that 90-day car, the fact that we were genuinely losing money in that car, the used car manager would say, well, I've actually made $3,000 gross on that car. Well, that's irrelevant. If it's a $50,000 motor car that's been in stock for 120 days, it's a loss. It's a loss maker. It's a loss leader. So they're probably two of the things that stand out.
Yeah, I love that. It's we had Sean Bradley on this podcast a while back, and we're still talking about videos and where he's taking it now. So listeners can go back and find that. And the other thing that Dale Pollock that really hit home for me is if you go to a Tesco's or a supermarket or a Coles New World in Australia, they don't have the same stock turn on milk as they do as a tin of beans. But so many times in the motor trade, we just had the same stock turn on a used car. And when he just turned around and said, no, every used car, you've got to treat it individually. If you've got that big lumpy car, okay, that's the one that you probably have to have a shorter sell-by date. I'm pretty sure it was him that talked about the idea of having this sell-by date and the return on investment on each car. I love that. Absolutely love that approach. We'll have to see if we can get Dale on this as well at some point there.
Yeah. Just to add, I often say to dealers, have a look at your 90-day plus report for used cars. Mm-hmm. And as sure as eggs, they're always the heavier cars. So that proves the point. And
they're always the big lumpy cars, and they're the ones that, you get your head handed to you on the platter. Now, in normal times, okay, but at the moment, I mean, used cars have gone up. How many months in a row in Australia have they gone up in price? I think I've seen a report in the UK recently, and they've gone up something like 16% over the last 12 months. Is it similar out there?
It's probably more here. The price boom has probably been more like 30% that's been reported, anywhere from 25 to 30%, and that price seems to be, it doesn't appear to have come back, and it's purely supply and demand. The reality is there's a massive undersupply here of new cars. So the next best alternative is a used car. And of course, with the pandemic, a lot of people don't wish to be on public transport. They feel safer driving their own motor car.
Yep.
And it's just meant a huge shift in behavior from so many people.
Hey, talking about that huge shift in behavior, we know that more and more customers start their buying journey digitally now. Or that's silly, not more customers. Almost every customer starts their journey digitally now. Before the pandemic, someone told me there was 19 hours of research online before they first make an approach to a dealer. Listen, after the pandemic, we could double that easily, couldn't we? So with that in mind, how is the sales process evolving? Is the sales process still relevant in a dealership?
Well, the reality is people do all their research online, but they drive the car in order to make sure it's right for them. Mm-hmm. So the truth is that any highly successful dealer always has a very high test drive to visit ratio. So the fundamentals don't change. And I hate to roll out an oldie but a goodie, but the feel of the wheel seals the deal. It really does. And, you know, I absolutely agree and support and promote a fabulous digital presence where people can actually gather all the information they need. And they should be able to do that in the easiest way possible. You know, it should be nice and easy to click through and find all the information. But the truth is that when you get people at the dealership, that's when you generate the excitement, that smell of the new car, and that you can't replicate that online. You just can't.
Yeah, it's quite interesting. I agree with you. People like to smell the car, smell the leather of it, take it for a drive and do that. However, I want to run this past you. You've probably heard of a company called Carvana in the States, and that's the company that has the vending machines. In Europe, we have a man called Alex Chesterton. He owned a company called Zoopla, which was a real estate, how do I describe it? It was a pricing service for your house, but then also a listing service so people could find out what the house was really worth. He sold that for millions. I think he had a company called iFilm. He liked the idea of Carvana, but he started over here a company called Zookar. Now, in the last 2 years, Frank, Zookar started, and in the industry, there's lots of people say, people won't buy online. They won't buy online. But in the first 6 months, he had a valuation of something like 100 million, which of course, not making any profit. And people said he was mad. I think it was 6 months after that, the valuation was something like 600 million. He was then the first billion company, unicorn company. They floated on the New York Stock Exchange, and they're talking about a 5 billion valuation. That's with a B, not a million. 5 billion. Now, this company has lost 109 million, I think it is, in the last 6 months. So not made a profit yet. And I think every car they're selling, they're losing something like 400 at the moment. So I just want to get your views. There's lots of people in Sydney think, hey, this is the future. This is the way things are going there. His valuation is probably like a .com valuation, like an Amazon that lost money 15 years in a row until they started making money. So there's lots of people there. That whole model, is that coming to Australia? Do you see any place for this where people are just buying purely used cars online and they have a 7-day time to return the car if they want?
I think when it comes to a motor car, it's generally the second largest purchase that someone's likely to make in their life. So when it comes to a house, it is or an apartment, if you like, it would be very unusual to buy that purely based on the online listing, and that people want to go out and see it. They want to actually look at the structure. They want to look at the rooms. They want to look at the area. They want to actually feel comfortable. It's for them. They want to look around. The motor car is the second largest purchase, obviously, after a house. So totally get that there are people who will buy cars online. There's no question about that. But I still firmly believe, based on what I see in talking to my clients, that the experience of driving the motor car, feeling it, smelling it, feeling comfortable in that car, having your spouse, I suppose, there with you going, yes, this is the car for us, is you just can't replicate that online. That's,
you know what, I think you're dead
something,
right.
Something yeah. I just can't see that ever going. There's always going to be a need for that, would be my view.
I think you're dead right. And here's quite funny. That company we're talking about, they have bought a used car supermarket chain with 19 dealers. I think they're realizing that they need clicks and bricks. I think it's both sides of it. I don't think it's clicks only, because exactly what you said. I want to touch the car. I want to drive the car. I want to see what it feels like there. It's not just that book or that CD. I definitely think they've even noticed that at this stage there. Yeah, very interesting. Now, I want to move on to why I reached out to you. There is a lot of noise with the manufacturers, the OEMs, about introducing an agency sales model. I actually don't know many of them who aren't talking about some sort of sales agency model. Now, I understand that Honda Australia have introduced this model, and that's why I just want to get your views on it and what's been the effect on the dealers, the Australian Honda dealers. How has it worked out there? Is it working? What's your views on it? And also, should investors be concerned about the sales agency model?
Well, it's been a political hot potato, without question. And what we need to remember is dealers make 10 to 20-year investments in facilities, in corporate image and whatnot. I mean, we are talking about, in Australia, and my understanding is for the rest of the developed world, property prices which are at all-time highs. And dealers are required to make commitments, financial, which go well beyond dealer agreements. So we need to actually understand that level of financial commitment. So when you talk about Honda, so what we need, I think there's more to it with Honda. Honda, in my opinion, from what I understand, made a decision that they were going to change their business model, not just because of changing the relationship with the dealers, but also the amount of cars they wish to sell. So they went from being a 50 or 60,000, call it a 5 to 6% market share brand, to basically now aspiring to 2 to 3%, from what I can see. Okay. So they figured that their network would be unviable at that sort of level of sales. Now, they also chose, so effectively, when we talk about at a metropolitan level, 60 to 70% of their dealers were effectively terminated.
Wow.
So the
Say that
ones that
again.
have
Sorry, can you say? Did you say 60 to 70% of metropolitan dealers terminated?
yep. So
Wow.
the ones that remain, for instance, in Melbourne, I think there are 3, I believe. And so those 3 that remain now become super dealers, if you like,
Hmm.
but they're required to have satellite service capability in
Right.
order to ensure that the customers can continue to have their cars serviced without having to drive, ridiculous distances. So from a Honda perspective, you can't just look at it, in my view, as an agency play.
Okay.
I think there was from what I can gather, there was a change in philosophy in terms of pricing of the actual motor cars, as in pricing up,
Hmm.
less sales, and also being done by way of agency, if you like. So I think it's too early to say whether it will be a success or not. The reality is, at the moment, if you've got motor cars in stock, you're going to be successful because there's a
Yes.
significant undersupply right now. So if you're ever going to introduce an agency model, I suppose now would be the time,
Yeah.
because
Good point.
there is a massive undersupply. But the truth is also, Honda sales from when they were a normal franchise distribution model to
Mhm.
now have literally halved.
Wow. Literally halved. Now, but again, it depends. That's a decision they made because they wanted to bring in less cars. They wanted to
That's right.
and push the price up.
That's
They're
right.
trying to go to that prestige model. Is that what they're looking at?
Yes, I think yes. And I think, if I may just take the conversation to another brand, I think the interesting one is Mercedes-Benz.
Okay.
Okay, so Mercedes-Benz is the one that's creating a fair bit of discussion at the moment. And I say that because they're basically introducing an agency model in Australia effective January of next year.
Hmm.
Now, that's been met with a lot of dealer resistance, and it's well publicised here in Australia that I think it's 85% of the dealers have actually signed onto a class action, which
Wow.
is against Mercedes-Benz, which is all about basically seeking some sort of damages
Hmm.
for the loss of value of their businesses in transitioning to this agency model. So that'll be very interesting to see how that plays out. It's fair to say that there's a lot of very unhappy Mercedes dealers
Yeah.
who are, looking to achieve some sort of recompense through the legal channels. So that's probably the more topical one at the moment here in Australia.
Wow. Okay. Class action. Well, that was going to be my next question. How does it affect the value of a dealership? Because if I'm a dealer, okay, I'm going to invest in infrastructure, in property, and invest that. If I get the situation where I just get paid a handling fee, and it's the same handling fee, and it just depends on who's in my postcode area, if I can sell the car or not. Are you going to invest in that dealership? Are you going to be entrepreneurial? I don't know if you would, but also, surely it's all about who owns the customer. Is that what the manufacturer is actually looking for, in your view?
Well, I'll answer this in a couple of ways. So the factories talk about the transparency of pricing and the
Hmm.
fact that customers can come in and know that this is the price, and not have an experience where there's such variability in pricing between dealers.
Hmm.
Okay, I get that. I understand that. I would also counter that by saying that a lot of the variability in pricing occurred under a framework where, how would I put it, the dealers were operating under significant target pressure with
Yeah.
significant bonuses attached to it. So, quite literally, there were brands whereby you'd get to near the end of the quarter and the gap may have been 50 or 60 cars, and we only had a week to go, and a normal sale rate might have been 20 cars a week. And dealer says, guess what? We're going to have to do 50 cars this week. So whatever it takes in order to get those 50 cars, 50 deals done, in order to achieve our target, we just have to do it. So you end up with distress selling. So
Yep.
I would argue that a lot of that actual price variability was created by programs that were in fact introduced by the OEMs, by the manufacturers. So
That's so true, isn't it? That everyone wants that fixed pricing, and I've always said yes, but we've got a trade-in involved. But you're right; it is actually the pressure that we're all put on with forced registrations. The manufacturers have probably caused the issue themselves. Um, They really have.
So I think, well, I think in some brands that was a major issue here in Australia. The other way I'll answer it is this.
Mm-hmm.
So the high performers really back themselves in to create, if you like, better outcomes, achieve higher average gross per unit, be able to buy used cars better as a trade-in, and all of this.
Mm-hmm.
So the entrepreneurial flair that one can demonstrate in an agency environment is obviously a lot more limited when it comes to new car sales. So I believe there is a strong chance that the high caliber talent will drift away from the agency brands and be more attracted to the traditional franchising model where they can generate higher outcomes for themselves. So there's also the potential for a loss of talent away from these agency models, I believe.
Yeah, that is a very, very good point. I actually had one guest, and he didn't want this recorded for obvious reasons, but he said, you know what, the sales agency model, isn't it a bit like communism? I thought, well, that might be a bit harsh, but his view is, but hold on, if they're all going to be equal, okay, there's no reason why I would invest in the business. But again, you take it from a salesperson's point of view. It's I get paid exactly the same amount if the customer buys the car or not, or whatever price there is in it. Actually, that salesperson might not be wanting to close as much or asking for the business, whereas they go down to the road to another manufacturer that's not a sales agency, okay, that's a traditional dealer that really wants the business. Actually, they're going to lose out to that dealer, won't they? I mean, in communism, it's never been a good idea for innovation. Okay, with tariffs, we've got to be careful with tariffs sometimes because tariffs just make people fat and lazy. Surely the sales agency model might make some dealers fat and lazy. Am I being a bit harsh there?
I think time will tell, but I will also bring this example to the fore. So the number one brand in Australia, as you know, Simon, is Toyota. Toyota have a market share here of about 22%. Now, the Toyota model is probably regarded as the most robust model going around. Toyota took their dealers away from targets many, many years ago when they recast their business model, and they spent a lot of time looking at the guest experience through Disney and whatnot. They spent a lot of time and effort in understanding and optimizing their customer experience. But what they do is they reward the dealer based on standard achievements. And that's all about CSI results, ensuring there's transparent pricing in service and the quality of the experience. It's all about the quality of the experience. So it's interesting to note that a brand that has gone completely away from, target pressure and target bonuses is also the number one brand in Australia with the, dare I say, what is regarded as the most solid dealer business model going around and enjoying optimal dealer profitability.
Yeah.
So I would say, in my humble opinion, that we've learned that if we can manage the inventory and supply line so as to not create oversupply, everyone can win. Yeah. Everyone can win without having to overhaul something which ain't broken.
Yeah. Listen, I don't know if you're able to say this or not, and please tell me to shut up if I need to, but I know you deal at high level with some manufacturers out there, and you mentioned before the brands you work with. I'm sure they come to you and ask for advice about what do you think we should do. Is it fair to say your advice would be the agency model wouldn't be the right one for some of the manufacturers you're dealing with directly?
So I'll answer it this way. If I look at dealers who achieve extraordinary outcomes, and let's say their brand has a market share of 10%, and yet they achieve a market share in their PMA in their prime market area of 20%, and I look at them, they are achieving it generally because they're demonstrating a huge amount of entrepreneurial flair. They're bringing so much energy and passion and drive to their business, and it's a business that they own. So I believe that that ownership component, the ability to influence, the ability to bring the entrepreneurial flair, the ability to generate excitement in the team, the ability to remunerate at higher levels for people who achieve higher gross and whatnot, and who achieve higher CSI targets, all of that, okay, is going to be easier to achieve under the traditional model versus an agency model.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with you, but it'd be interesting to see how it plays out. I didn't realize about Mercedes and 85% of the dealers doing a class action. I think they're right to protect their business. That'd be very interesting to see how that one plays out. It will be.
It will be, it will be. But if you were a dealer and you just spent millions and millions on your facilities and bringing it to standard, and you know, you didn't know what your future looked like, you could well understand why they feel hard done by.
Yeah, that's true. Well, listen, moving forward then, is there a place, is there a future for the independent dealer? And the reason why I say that, it seems that the groups are getting bigger and bigger. In the States, they seem to get bigger and bigger. In Europe, the groups are getting bigger and bigger. I think it was in Brisbane, Breakfast Creek from memory. I went to a Mercedes dealership there. I don't know the exact number, but I think they spent something like 100 million Australian dollars on it. I might have that wrong there, okay, but it's a huge, huge business there. So I want to ask you, is there a place for the independent dealer, or are the groups going to take over? I suppose it comes back to what you're saying about, does the dealer have skin in the game?
Well, I think at the moment, the car industry is enjoying incredible times, incredible success. The profitability is unparalleled, certainly that we are seeing in Australia. So is it a great time for the public companies to be buying dealerships? Absolutely. It's a fantastic time. But as an 81-year-old dealer explained to me who just sold out, that these things tend to be cyclical, Frank, were his words. And when he started, well, over 50 years ago, the General Motors brand, we're known as Holden here in Australia, was largely controlled by three major groups. And yet that then developed into all of these independently owned. So I would answer it this way. Whilst the returns are considerable, absolutely the publics will be continuing to consolidate and buy up. But I would argue that when things get very tough, and invariably things do get tough at some point, these publics will seek to divest themselves of underperforming operations. And who'll be there to buy them?
Yeah,
that little independent person who thinks they can make a dollar when the public can't, because they've got a lower cost structure and they'll find a way. So there's a bit of a cyclical element to this, in my view, as well.
Yeah, that's a good view. That is a good view there. 100 million. Was I right with that number in Breakfast Creek in Brisbane?
Yeah, it's about right. It's about right. Yeah, that's my reading as well.
Yeah, I've got to tell you, the return on that investment, it's got to take a while. I take it there's lots of manufacturer investment in that. It can't be a private dealer spending that.
Yeah, my understanding is, I believe, LSH, who have a close association with Mercedes-Benz. Yeah.
Yeah, it has to be for that sort of investment. Okay.
So some sort of cross ownership is my understanding, but anyway, that's what I read and hear.
Of course,
don't quote me on that.
No, if it's LSH, we have LSH operating in the UK, and they have a equally impressive. I think the one in Brisbane's a lot bigger, but there's an impressive one just outside of Manchester. Again, you need that sort of investment to make something like that stack up, I'm sure. So let's think about going forward then. What do you believe how's the industry going to change over the next couple of years? And if you're a dealer listening to this, if you're a senior manager, what's the one thing you think they need to be focusing on over the next couple of years in the industry?
It's a really good question. I think I've told you this before, Simon, but my experience is good habits are formed in bad times and bad habits are formed in good times. At the moment, quite literally, if you're a salesperson in a car dealership, if someone doesn't buy that car off you, someone else will, so you can afford to be less than regimented when it comes to your processes and so forth. And in reality, it's easy, and it's easy to achieve high gross profit because we are in serious short supply. We're talking about some brands here which would be lucky to get 50% of their allocation, of their normal allocation this December quarter of stock. So creates an incredible shortage. So the one thing I would absolutely make non-negotiable is the ongoing diligence of the training and maintaining of the systems and processes which made you successful in the first place. Because at the moment, it's easy to deviate from that and still be successful.
Yeah, it's so true. It's low-hanging fruit at the moment, isn't it? It really is. And it's I had a guy who's been in the motor trade just this week actually, 4 whole months, and of course he's selling used cars like shell and peas, and already he's got that. It's not his fault, to be fair. That's all he knows. But it's almost like, hold on, the sales process, you'll need that process at some point. You need to learn it, because at the moment, his process is car, I've got it. Do you want it? If not, there's 10 other people who want it. But, you know, that's not going to last forever, is it? You've got to, it's so true. It's bad habits. Say that phrase again for me. The bad habits forming.
So good habits are formed in bad times. Bad habits are formed in good times. And we all know the good habits, when times are tough, you have to be better, you have to be smarter, you have to work harder. And you know, the other one I always say is 10% inspiration, 90% perspiration. In other words, success is just hard work and sticking to the basics.
Ah, that's good. I love that. Love that. Hey, listen, this might come into my next question, because this might be your tip or idea. Listen, this podcast is all about sharing best practice and tips and ideas in the motor trade. Is there any one tip that you think, hold on, that's absolutely brilliant, I like the idea of that one, and you'd like to share it with people listening to this?
In terms of success in the motor game?
Yeah.
I mean, one tip. The owner, the DP has to be invested, has to be fully invested. You know, the things I see, the dealers that are successful, those ones who, you know, watch their dealerships wake up in the morning. They're not every morning, but they'll come in and they'll just watch what happens, how the business opens up. So they're invested, they're seen to be invested, they're visible, they drive accountability. You know, what I said before, the crops always grow better with the sound of the farmer's footsteps nearby. It's hard to escape that sort of, if you like, leadership and governance.
Yeah, brilliant. Frank, I just want to say thank you very much for that. I really appreciate your insight and what's happening in the Australian motor trade. Definitely going to have a look at what's happening with Mercedes there. That's definitely going to be one to watch there, and we'll see how the future pans out. Thank you again for your time. I really appreciate it.
Absolute pleasure, Simon. Take care.
Yeah. That just leaves me to say that all details of this episode and other episodes on the selling in the motor trade can be found on our website, simcotraining.co.uk. Go there to get a copy of our book, Words That Sell Cars. Go there to sign up to a free trial of our Sales Fitness online sales training program. Easiest way to get hold of me is Simon Bowkett through LinkedIn. Thank you.